that anymore.
No, I guess Monday is the confirmation vote. Is that right? Yeah.
The Democrats didn't even bother showing up to the thing, which,
Yeah.
they weren't needed anyway.
I think the only thing I'd say about this is shows you how crazy of a year 2020 is, because we can mention how a lot of people thought that would become the overriding issue. And then, of course, Trump, COVID, everything changed.
No one's even talking about
everybody's just kind of like,
Like the day Trump got COVID, that story died.
Right. Immediately. Yeah.
Welcome to this week's Two Men in the Middle. This is where two men in the middle of the country get together and talk about politics and current affairs. I'm Craig Huey.
I'm Brandon Kinnig.
So we're coming to you on Friday because we wanted to give an extra day so we could process the second presidential debate.
The second and final debate.
Are you happy it's the final?
I am. I'm very happy. I don't think we needed 3. I think 2 was more than enough. And I'm ready for Election Day to be here. Is there...
Because the final debate, if they would have had it, I think they said the 29th is when that would be. That's a little too close to election for comfort, I think, for most candidates.
I think so, and it would have lost any impact on voting with as many people that are voting early this year, which we'll touch upon later. The later you have the debates, the less effective they are. I would argue that this debate was going to be minimally effective just based on viewership falling, as well as just the percentage of people who have already voted and have made up their mind.
I haven't seen the total viewership, but it was certainly less than what watched the first debate, and that follows the historical pattern that the first hour of the first debate is what really counts, and you get diminishing returns after that.
It's an axiom in politics that you have to, you need to do well the first debate if you're going to use the debate as a launching pad or springboard for generating momentum. So Trump lost that completely with his performance. So he attempted to recover in this debate by being much more disciplined and not shouting and speaking out of turn.
Let's just say normal.
Or
just not act like a jackass.
Right. So, the bar is so low, right? So he didn't act like a jackass. So he had some modicum of discipline. So it was a success for him via that standpoint. But at the same time, he continued to just retell a litany of falsehoods, lies, continued to lack empathy, in his approach. I mean, there's so much to take away there in terms of what he said or didn't say.
Yeah. I mean, a better version of Trump is still Trump.
Right.
You still have all of the problems that you had leading up to that. Just in general, what was your overall reaction to that debate? Did you see anything that you thought changed any of the axis of the race in any way? Or just overall, what's your takeaways from what you saw last night?
I mean, this debate was much more based on substance just because, number one, the moderator had the ability to mute the mic, so that helped keep things going.
I like that. I thought that worked well.
That needs to be, I think, just a default for future debates, a rule that's included. And so there was, much discussion about the issues. There was also the attempt again by Trump to deflect to Hunter Biden, which I don't think was successful. No. I think that's kind of insider politics that most people don't know or are paying attention to.
Yeah.
And there was the inability of Trump to recognize the fallout from coronavirus. He was asked point blank by Biden, told by Biden, you refuse to take responsibility. And it was funny because Trump said, I do take responsibility. It's all China's fault. So he completely contradicted himself. He did not take responsibility at any modicum. And, continued on this tirade that things would be much worse. So I think Trump, by the lowest of low standards did well and was successful. But I think, and the moderator I thought did a great job. I mean, I think she was pretty steady.
It was watchable. It was watchable. Digestible. Trump is Trump, but at least you could pick out some common themes and you could consume it as a news consumer.
And I thought Biden did fairly well for the most part, except on fossil fuels when he made that comment about the oil industry transitioning, that he would transition away from the oil industry under his term. And I get what he was saying. Again, the more artful way of saying that would be we favor an all of the above approach to energy. but I think that you don't want to give your opponent a line that can be used in attack ads. And Trump pounced on that, as you saw. He's like, are you listening, Pennsylvania, Texas?
Yeah.
Ohio?
Because we're going to get rid of the oil industry.
But again,
that's what we're going to do.
That's not feasible, and I think...
No serious adult thinks that's going to happen, or thinks that's what Biden
And
did.
so I think if everybody listened to the entire clip of what Biden said and what he said after, it's pretty clear what he means. And the fact of the matter is most of the oil industry already, the big players, are already planning for that transition. They're already investing in some of these renewables. They're changing their distribution lines. So that's just smart. That's business, and that's already being done.
And this is your point. A great answer to that would be, we're going to help the oil industry transition into whatever's next.
We're going to be a partner with them.
By the way, not that they need
transition.
that, because these companies are some of the most profitable organizations in the world.
Yeah, and I think that was also a good point by Biden. He brought up the fact the subsidies that they get. It's to the tune of $20 billion a year.
People, what do they need $20 billion from the federal government for?
Still, and it's so I thought that was a good comeback. It was funny that Biden was able to get Trump talking about wind, because Trump just devolves into insanity when he talks about birds dying and gases that just come up from the ground.
And you can't watch TV if the wind's not blowing. Right. He repeated that at his rally in the Woodlands or the Villages today down in Florida.
Oh gosh!
Just again, I don't know what's clicked in his brain that makes him remember that, but that's just sheer insanity.
It's lunacy.
It's stupid. So. Okay, so the oil and gas, throwaway line by Biden, should have handled it better.
Yeah.
This people forget, this is the third time Biden's run for president, and he's not very good at this.
He is not, no.
His whole political history is full of unforced errors, gaffes, and things like that.
I mean, he's ran for president many times, and there's a reason why he wasn't able to before. So
he's not very good at running for president.
He is not. And that's one thing I'll give Kamala Harris credit, because I think that she's weak on some areas, but the one thing she was very forceful on during the VP debate was just hammering, that Biden's not going to end fracking. She said that over and over. So she made it very clear with Pence when Pence tried to throw all these fear-mongering scare tactics out there. She hit back pretty hard. So that was the one area where she does well, and Biden sometimes is not forceful enough in defending and hitting back.
But this is what's so silly. The whole reason Biden won the Democratic primary is so we won't do stupid shit like try to wipe out the oil industry. Let's say we set a goal that fossil fuel is bad and we want to get rid of it by, what's a realistic time do you think we could transition away from fossil fuels?
I mean,
50 years? 75 years?
I would say, 50 to 75. I think that's realistic.
Here's why that line is meaningless. It's a throw out to the more progressive side of the AOC wing that wants to implement a full Green Deal. And for centrist older folks like me, we know that's...
Right.
We know what that line is. We don't take that.
Well, it also evokes like what California is doing, where they said, I think by 2030 they want to eliminate gas-powered vehicles.
Yeah.
Well, I guess you can still buy and sell like trade vehicles, but in terms of new gas-powered vehicles for sale, they're saying by 2030 that won't be allowed, which again it seems like pie in the sky. That's not realistic.
Where Trump loses the thread is he takes that comment by Biden, he goes down to the Villages today, and he turns it into Biden's going to wipe out the oil industry, Biden's going to turn off your heat, Biden's going to turn off your electricity, Biden's going to force you into wind power, so if the wind's not blowing, you're not going to watch TV. It doesn't matter, because the president himself can't spin that line into any type of coherent argument that any human being would want to listen to.
And it's so, I mean, and the problem is Trump takes it, so far to where it's just not believable. It lacks credibility because it sounds so ridiculous.
Yes.
So it's like, how many people are actually going to take that at face value and be afraid based on that?
The first note I wrote down is Trump has no answer to COVID.
Yeah.
And that's stunning because, again, you have to know that's number one. You have to know your current answer doesn't track really well. I would think if you were going to prepare for any answer, if you were Trump, boy, that's the one you would really try to make a pivot to and present something completely different on.
Right. Well, and that was another, I think, shocking moment of the night that I forgot to highlight, was the fact that he completely downplayed the impact of the virus so far. He said, there's some states that are having spikes, but others that are not. And he said again that it's going away. It is not going away. We're seeing spikes in more than 30 states. We're on this new wave that's bubbling up at the same time that we're hitting peak flu season. So I think, again, it was another tone-deaf moment by the president when it came to that specific line, because he continues to parrot these disproven claims that it's going away, it's not so bad, and on and on.
As we stand here Friday, I think I heard today that we're averaging 77,000 new cases of COVID a day.
That's an all-time high. Yeah,
all-time high. A couple of weeks ago, we were sitting at 40,000, and Fauci gets on TV and says, folks, we got to drive that down to 10 by Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
If we don't get that down to around 10,000, the winter is really going to suck. And it's almost doubled since that time. So you can't wish COVID away. It's not just going to go away on its own. I don't think Trump understands the damage he's doing, or how the key groups he's going to need to show up for him, how they interpret that answer when he gives it that
because
way.
That's still the number one issue.
It's still the number one
issue. And it's
issue.
interesting is that if you look at the crosstabs of some of this polling, even people that rate Trump better on the economy than Biden, and then rate him better on coronavirus, they are still saying they're voting for Biden based on coronavirus, how that's being handled. So that is the preeminent issue, even above the economy, to Trump's detriment.
And most people have put the economy and the virus together.
They are, they're intertwined.
You don't have one without
right.
the other. So Trump's big thing is, I think our quarterly GDP number, monthly GDP number, comes out at the end of October. And this is something, again, that Trump's going to gravitate to from an economic basis. He's going to try to tout this number in the stock market as his proof that he's got some sort of plan, I guess, or the recovery is well underway, or his plan is being implemented now to get the economy back to.
But I think that's going to be tough, because the last unemployment numbers that came out for September were actually below expectations. Yeah. So, again, we're trying to crawl back up, but it's difficult. It's a very difficult rebound that we're trying to make from this. I mean, by all accounts, if we weren't in a pandemic, we would call this a depression based on how many jobs are lost and the hit the economy took.
And Trump is clearly a creature of habit, and he feels he won the election last time in the last 2 weeks. And you can see him replaying almost page by page the playbook that he ran in 2016. He invited some shady business partner or potential
of Hunter Biden.
I can't say it's like Bubabisky or something, Belinsky or something. As far as I understand, this was a gentleman who had proposed putting together a company and hiring Hunter Biden for some sort of board level or high level position for this company. They were doing something in China, and they clearly were going to hire Hunter Biden specifically for his name value. That was it. There was no other reason. He was there, and and they would have hired him for putting this for the purpose of using his family connections, which, number one, that might be a compelling story to tell, except for the fact that the company never materialized.
Right. So again, there's nothing to go to. So how do you put this on Joe Biden? But again, Republicans are trying. I think that today they were supposed to have a committee hearing and have this Bobulinski guy.
Is going to do something stupid.
Of course.
I'm sure.
Yeah, but I mean, again, if this is the October surprise they're fumbling with, I mean, there's nothing there. That's the problem.
And I'm pretty sure I'm legally right about this. If Law and Order has taught me anything, if you and I put together a plan to go rob that convenience store across the street, but we don't actually carry out the plan, then that's not a crime.
It's right.
So I think people are starting to realize, what really are you accusing Biden of doing here? Because so far, this is a hypothetical crime he may have committed if this company actually would have formed. So if that's your leading indicator of corruption, that fizzles out real quickly.
Yeah.
And I go through this all the time. Hey, Brandon, are you personally surprised that politicians' kids and family tread off their name to make money?
Not at all. It happens all the time. And if you really want to get to the heart of the problem, we do not have robust laws against it.
No.
It's allowed, and it continues to happen. Children of Congress, men and women, congressional spouses, they all engage in this. I mean, you can go down the line of congressional members and see how pervasive this is.
Please tell me you have a story you could tell of, like, you were working in D.C. and, like, somebody's cousin popped in or something, or there was somebody you could point to say, what in the world is that person doing? And you're like, oh, that's so-and-so's, son-in-law. And you're like, that totally makes sense.
Oh, I mean, that happened more than a couple of times. I remember being at a committee hearing on...
So let's back up. You're on a senator's staff.
Right.
Okay.
I remember being on a committee hearing on the Hill where the daughter of a senator came up to one of the pharmaceutical industry CEOs who was testifying on the Hill to inquire about stock options right after her father was, there, and it was supposed to be a grilling on.
So she literally thought it was like a sales pitch
prices.
To get them to buy stock in this company, apparently.
Right, and I think CEO was ushered back into her father's office later, and if it was one of those cases where if you went through like the campaign contributions, a lot of campaign contributions made. This was a senator who had voted very, pro pharma in terms of tax breaks and whatnot. But yeah, influence peddling. It goes on daily on the Hill. It's not new, and I think anybody who's worked on the Hill sees it. And it's always, people, I guess, somewhat get used to it, but it always kind of rubbed me the wrong way whenever I saw kids and spouses that were there, and because again, that's not normal in any other environment, and we wouldn't accept it in most other environments either.
And being from the Midwest, we have some expectations of accountability, and people are in their own way.
Right,
and
nepotism.
Stuff like that.
It gives bad taste in your mouth.
So I guess what we're getting at is, I'm not trying to excuse what Hunter Biden did, because Hunter Biden is obviously treading off his father's
He
name.
is. I think that's obvious.
And if you do a little reading about Burisma, that was awful. I mean, this was somebody over in the Ukraine who is the minister of ecology or something, who basically just got all these gas permits and just kept them to himself and opened a company. And then he went a step farther that if you owned a company that you had a gas permit, he just took it from you.
Right.
So they just straight up thieved. And they went around, I forget who else was on it, but they hired 4 or 5 Americans and Europeans who have family names and recognitions to their board when they knew, okay, the government's going to come for us now.
Yep.
So is that illegal? No. Is there any evidence that Joe Biden did anything? No.
It's not illegal. It's unethical, and it's influence peddling. But the other part of this, too, is that Ukraine is rife with corruption, and they're still trying to clean that up. But, I mean, every sector, every facet of government there, I mean, it's basically a pay-to-play economy, and that's how that economy functions. So again, there's parts of the world that are very similar like that, and Ukraine is one where they have had much difficulty getting out from under that. And the moral of the story is, if anybody was asked to become part of some company in Ukraine or be on their board, you have to think that there's a very good likelihood.
And if your last name's Biden, you really got to think that, don't you?
Well, that you're being used, influence peddling, and also that company may not be on the up and up, that there's some conduct there that would not fly in the United States, but would fly there. And again, they're trying to clean that up, but that's just been the modus operandi of doing business.
Well, I mean, they've laid out a clear pattern as a country, Ukraine, what you do when you want to clean up corruption. I mean, it's obvious. You elect a stand-up comic, which is what they did.
That's what they did.
Their
and that
Prime
was the
Minister
person that Trump made
comedian.
that phone call to. Yeah.
There's a video of him on like Ukraine's version of We've Got Talent.
I've seen that.
Where his big shtick is he's playing the piano with his wiener. That's his big funny.
Oh, I did not see that part. Okay.
Yeah, it's classic.
Well, and he kind of ran like a Trumpian candidate, right? He ran as this outsider.
Anti-corruption.
No government experience. Yeah.
So while that's gross, and while we all wish that didn't happen, I think it's baked into the cake a little bit with politicians that we accept a little bit of that.
It is. And again, if that's something that you are disgusted with and you want to see changed, then you need to vote for members of Congress, because there needs to be laws passed in Congress that restrict that. That's where it's a legislative branch that has the power to restrict themselves. And unfortunately, we see this time and time again. congressmen and women typically do not pass laws that restrict their own behavior.
But you just said something that if you are really against this, what you need to do is vote for somebody who would actually change a law to outlaw it.
Yeah.
I would suggest to you that if you're really against corruption and nepotism, there's no way in this universe you would vote for Donald Trump.
Oh, well, that's a given. And again,
that's what I'm saying. Who is this message for? The anti-corruption crowd?
Well, it's beyond comical for Trump world to even point at Hunter Biden, knowing that all of Trump's children are basically involved in running his businesses, that there is a conflict of interest galore, that there is no separation between the government and Trump's businesses, and that Trump has used his position to further his business interest, let alone you have Jared and Ivanka, who are government or taxpayer
tens of millions of dollars.
They're on White House staff and they are making millions and millions of dollars in the private sector simultaneously.
Trump family is patient zero for family-led nepotism and corruption.
Do you know, and with all the anti-China talk, do you know there was only a few people who've been able to get patents for their products in China? One of those is Ivanka Trump. She got 20.
20, she did a whole bunch of them.
Imagine that. I wonder how that worked.
This is, again, what I love the Hugh Hewitts of the world that are just wringing their hands over this level of corruption on the Bidens and just, this is a constitutional... No, this is you trying to woo into existence anything that you can do to change the outcome of this election.
Because
that's all this
is. Because they cannot run on Trump and his record. They have to find something, a distraction, a diversion to point to that would cause voters to question the other side and really suppress the vote. I mean, it's in their interest to get anybody who's just moderately Biden or on the fence of Biden to stay home, because those people will likely not vote for Trump. But if they can ensure they don't vote for Biden, it helps Trump's cause.
And the Wall Street Journal and Fox News has come out and basically said, we've looked at all of this and there is absolutely no crime committed by anybody in any of these materials. There's just simply nothing here. And this is where one vision of the media, this is where the news people are at war with the opinion people.
Yeah.
The Wall Street Journal, which basically said, we saw that story months ago and said, there's no way. It's not sourced and we wouldn't run it. And just to level set with everybody, this is the story, and I think we talked about this a couple weeks ago. This is the story where the blind guy who owns the computer repair shop, who won't sign off that it was Hunter Biden that even dropped off this laptop. I'll say it again, because he's blind, okay, took this laptop, made a copy of the hard drive, and gave it to Steve Bannon,
of all people,
who passed it to Julie. Just on that alone, you're not going to run this story.
Let alone Hunter Biden lives in California, so he decided to drop his laptop off, I guess, when he happened to be in Delaware, to a shop there instead of where he lives, and decided not to pick it back up.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so incredulous. I mean, the entire story.
And I know if I've got a laptop with potentially damaging material to myself, my father, videos of me smoking crack and having sex with underage girls, I just drop those off all over the place and never go back and get that.
Right.
The point being is the story in some ways is so comical. If the social media companies hadn't Streisand effect this thing by banning it, we probably would have moved off by now.
Yeah.
And for most people on the right, this is it's more of a media point. Hey, if this were Trump and his taxes with leaked, you were all over that. Why doesn't this get the same thing? And there's some legitimacy.
There is to that, yeah. Again, I think it's one of those cases, like you said, the Streisand effect, where you let the story get out there, it dies on its own, but lack of merit, and then you move on and you give the story greater impact by trying to, suppress it.
And if if Biden's been this level of a criminal for 47 years, it should be pretty easy to dig up his past, I would think.
I mean, he's been in the public limelight for so long. I mean,
he was vetted by Obama for a VP spot. I just don't think there's going to be a lot of meat on that.
I don't think so either. Well, the other thing, this is kind of a good segue, because we keep talking about like impact of all of this stuff. And the problem is we're so late in the cycle that, there's diminishing returns if anything big were to drop now anyway. So I'll use that to segue into early voting in this country and what's happening. We know a number of states have expanded vote by mail, advanced voting in person weeks ahead of what they would normally do. And so despite the court battles and the attempts by Trump and Republicans to limit access to the polls, as of Thursday, when that debate premiered, we had over 50 million Americans that had voted early,
amazing.
Which is phenomenal. And to put that in perspective, that is more than 7 times the number who had voted early at this point in the election cycle in 2016. 7 times as many. And there was only about 137 million people that voted in the 2016 presidential election. So we already have had 37% of the total votes cast in the 2016 presidential election cast now early. 37% of that vote. So that tells you 2 things. Number one, so many more people are voting early this year, which means that, for Trump, he can't change the narrative.
Yeah.
And number 2, turnout is going to be way up.
Yeah.
They've talked about that this could vie for, I think, what they were said, 1916. Woodrow Wilson is the top.
This could beat 2008's turnout by far,
if not higher. So that it's incredible what we're seeing. There's a number of websites that actually track this nationally, and they update daily with the numbers, and they collect them by state. And you see some of these state by state numbers as well. It's pretty massive. And the problem for Republicans, again, is if you look nationally, about 50.1% of the turnout is Democrats, registered Democrats, about 27% is Republicans, and then 20% unaffiliated. As Republicans are now having to bank on more of their voters turning out on Election Day.
Yeah. Yeah. Trump already said it's got to be a red wave on the 3rd.
But see, that's problematic from a number of standpoints. Number one, it's more expensive for Republicans because they can't remove voters from their mailing list, for direct mail purposes, and so they have to continue to hit those voters.
You're chewing through money that has no. I never thought of that
because that's how the campaigns work. So you're able to almost election offices around the country. You get lists daily of who has voted and with those ballots returned, and so you remove those people from your mailing list and your digital targeting list, and so that way you're narrowing and you're spending more efficiently and effectively. Republicans aren't going to be able to do that. Plus, their get out the vote effort for Election Day, they're going to have to continue targeting just a massive number of voters, and it doesn't allow them to more effectively micro-target different voters because there's so many they have to go after. So it's really an awful set of circumstances. And again, it's driven by the president who has, basically made his base think that, voting early is fraudulent.
Yeah. I'm sorry I left you hanging during that transition, but I had to write down Rudy Giuliani.
How did we not cover that?
I wrote down Rudy Giuliani last 10 minutes. So the last 10 minutes is all we're going to combine what we like watching on TV and streaming with one of our favorites, Rudy G, who's got to have a nickname or something now. Big Time Rudy, Big Daddy R, something. He had a great week on that. Do you make anything of? I agree with you. This is a straight turnout election, and we could be hitting 140 to 150 million people, total vote in this election, and we could hit 100 million by the time we hit the 3rd.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So that is there any way to interpret that in any way other than Biden on the day when the 3rd rolls around, and I'm struggling with the phraseology. It's not voting starts because 100 million people. It's not early voting. Whenever the final day of the election happens, and if there's 100 million people, there's just not enough votes on the ground to come in on the 3rd to change the dynamic of the election.
That's what it's looking like because again, the margin of difference with registered Democrats and Republicans on the early vote now is so massive. And I think that's why a lot of Republicans are very worried about this. And again, it requires them to, there's no margin for error on Election Day. If something happens, somebody can't get to the polls, so it's a very different set of circumstances. And the thinking is that they're not going to be able to overcome that with where it is now. And this is what we're seeing state by state. It's the same. Florida is the same with early votes. It's closer, but it's still Democrats leading. So it's a very different dynamic, and you definitely would rather be the Democrats than the Republicans with this.
So I keep seeing the Republicans hit on this. They've registered like 200,000 more Republican voters in Pennsylvania. And I keep hearing this kind of over and over and over.
Yeah, but the problem is I don't think that
then you look at it in context,
yeah.
and it doesn't mean as much.
It doesn't, because again, even if that hasn't been validated, so depending on who these voters are and where they came from, okay, that's great. But even if that's the case, if Democrats are just able to get out more registered voters who typically don't vote, they can easily offset that. Yeah. We don't know, and I haven't heard a good analysis of these new voters. Are these like completely newly registered voters, or are these voters that were registered Democrat that have now registered Republican?
I heard these were totally new voters because they made a big deal about it. If people who register to vote, they like 90% of them vote in the next presidential election. So I get that that's something to be excited about, but it feels like for the Democrats, this is all just turnout. If we turn out, we win, and there's really not a lot the Republicans can do if we decide every part of the coalition votes.
Turns out, because what I have heard is some of these state-by-state registration numbers where it shows that Republicans will make gains in registration. If you actually go below the surface, some of these registration gains are Democrats who have re-registered as Republicans but have been voting Republican for a long time.
Yeah.
So they're old-time Democrats who haven't voted for a Democrat for president in years and have finally just been convinced to change their registration. And what most people don't know is that, I don't know if he's still doing it at his rallies, but last year and into early this year before the pandemic struck, the Trump campaign was savvy. They would go to people at their rallies and say, hey, if you're registered unaffiliated or registered D, register R, and they would get them to change. So that's been part of an effort they've been trying to do. But again, if you're going to a Trump rally and you've been voting Republican this whole time, okay, change from a D to an R. It doesn't change how you're going to vote.
Do you think Trump, with his debate performance last night, helped anywhere on the margins of his soft Republican support? People that were like, oh, I'll probably, I guess, vote for him, but I'm not happy about it, and I'll hold my nose and do it. Do you think that Trump, with just, again, not acting like a jackass, helped solidify, even on the margins, some of those voters?
I don't think so. I think it was too late to do it. And I think he came across as just less, God, I don't even know what
you can't find,
I can't find the adjective.
Ridiculous?
Less ridiculous.
He was less
offensive.
Less offensive.
So than he was before. But I don't think it was enough to overcome the lack of... I think if he would have combined that with an intelligent answer on coronavirus, an admission that, hey, we have failed in some aspects and we could do better and we will do better.
An ounce of humility.
And empathy.
But he showed a ton.
He showed no humility and no empathy. It was, I think, the same when he was asked about like the children that have been ripped apart from their parents that have it, that they've lost their parents. He didn't handle that well at all. He just pivoted into an attack. And then I think the closing of the debate, when they were both asked what they would say in their inauguration speech, and he just hit into Biden as an attack. It's like, really? You're going to attack Biden in your inauguration speech? And Biden said, we're one America, and see, he was able to, I think, close that in a way which most Americans will respond to.
That's why the oil and gas line is so ridiculous, too, that's some sort of game changer.
Yeah.
You just watch the President of the United States, when given a layup, tell us about why it's urgent and important that you remain the president. All he could do was attack his opponent. He's offered no vision, no policy, no nothing. That's just not part of just part of his shtick at this point. Typically,
I just don't see. I think even with the soft Republicans, I think they would have to see a shift in what Trump actually is doing and what he's saying. And tone is great, but tone it can't account for everything else.
Well,
nothing else changes.
I'm assuming he's going to poop all over that on Sunday when whatever he did with Leslie Stahl,
the 60-minute interview. Yeah,
and here's just another.
Wait, isn't it already out? Because then his campaign released the full,
some sort of like uncut version. The clip of it that I saw was him basically. Leslie Stahl comes in the room. Hello, Mr. President, and she kind of says in a very kind of casualist way, hey, are you ready for a tough interview? And Trump's like, no, I don't want a tough interview. I'm no. You never asked Biden tough stuff. No, I don't want. No, that's not what I was told this was going to be. So the part that I saw out of that is he's trying to set the narrative. So that's immediately,
as soon as right out of the gate.
From what I could see of it, I think they're even before they're on camera. This is these two just kind of, hey, Brandon, good to see you. This is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to happen. Even right there, and Trump's Trump's defense is, I told her right from the beginning, wasn't in the mood for any hard questions, which again, I don't know if you know who Leslie Stahl is, but kind of like that Mike Wallace guy.
Yeah.
It comes with the turf.
Right.
And then he acts like a baby for 45 minutes and stomps out. So whatever impression Trump gave
completely
of a new tone or
unpresidential.
whatever,
Yeah.
I mean, he's got 11 days. He'll shit on that multiple times between now and then.
And this is it. I mean, Trump is always his worst enemy. So he can show fleeting moments of discipline, but it never lasts. And so I expect he will go on a Twitter rampage or rant. There'll be multiple things that happen next 11 days. 11 days seems like it's not that long, but it's an eternity in Trump world. And so there will be plenty of other opportunities for him to take the focus back to him being unpredictable, turbulent, volatile, and then those soft Republicans who thought, oh, maybe he has slightly changed, will go, nope, he hasn't.
No. So usually in America, we're slow to adopt new things, but once we adopt something new, if we like it, we generally don't give it up.
Yeah.
So I think that analogy applies to how we voted this time around. For example, in Missouri, we technically don't have early voting, but you can do same-day absentee voting, which is basically the same thing as early in-person voting.
Yeah.
So I've already voted. You've already voted.
I have, yeah.
Kansas has had early voting for a while now.
Yeah, and Kansas, in addition to no excuse mail balloting, has for many years now had advance voting in person at locations for 2 weeks prior to the election. Now, this year, they took that an extra weekend, so there's 2 weeks, and that includes 3 weekends, so Saturdays that you can vote in advance in person. They've expanded the number of sites that you can vote in advance in person. Our Oak Park Mall, they opened up a site there. And then for ballots, mail ballots, they've put all these drop boxes in place. So basically, several of the library branches have drop boxes, and you can just drop your ballot out there.
I heard a commercial with Kamala Harris, and I just want to say that Senator Perdue from Georgia, world-class butthole there. Did you see in front of it when he kept mispronouncing
her name intentionally?
Yeah. If you want to be a douche, give yourself a big plus for that.
And he should be smarter, too, because he's in a tough race right now. I mean, he may not make it.
What was that message, and who was it for?
Yeah.
I don't know. Before I went on my Kabbalah rat, where was I going? We were talking about early voting.
Oh, yeah. So we were talking about how it's changing and how these changes may last, which I think they will. I think this is the beginning of, this sustained period of early voting.
Yeah.
So gone are the opportunities for there to be October surprises that have an impact. We're probably going to go into a permanent place in elections where you have up to half of the electorate vote before Election Day.
Well, and this is where I finally remember my thread here. She was talking about a Voting Rights Act 2.0, or a modernization of the Voting Rights Act, which lays out and guarantees some laws around early voting.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good idea. But I had a conversation with somebody this week. I am in no rush to see a federal voting system administered by the federal government.
Yeah,
one of the things I get it. It's a huge pain in the ass, but this whole 50 states giving 50 different elections provides a really nice firewall so that somebody in authority, maybe who's trying to keep their authority, like an unpopular president who knows maybe he's going to lose an election, there's no possible thing he can do to put his thumb on the scale.
Well, yes, I think that's a good point. I was also thinking it also reduces the opportunity for a hostile foreign power to effectively interfere and change the election, because you have 50 different state election systems. So, they may get headway and try to hack into a few, as the FBI announced earlier this week that both Russia and Iran, I think, had hacked into 2 election systems to get voter data. But it makes it much less likely they can actually impact the outcome of an election. Yeah. Because it's more it's not centralized, it's decentralized, which I think helps a lot.
And it's manual.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just no way to crack a system where it's manual ballots and you input them into a box counter and deliver the box. So
you can't. So there's a lot to be said for the system we have to prevent fraud, to prevent hacking, and then again, a executive who wants to do everything he can to win it, again, limitations. So there's a lot to be said for it.
Speaking of fraud, there's an open question now about where did all of this money that the Trump campaign had heading into this election?
Yes, they blew through that cash like crazy. It's all gone.
Mike Murphy had the line, 12 monkeys with flamethrowers couldn't have burned through that cash faster.
Yeah.
And I think the Trump grift, the long play, is coming into focus. The day and the idea that he filed for re-election his first day as president, I think that snaps a timeline into place. That if you wanted to be the most cynical and say Trump had no interest in being president, he did this as a way to save his business, he did this as a way to revitalize his brand. Well, there's no better way to do that than start raising money day one as a presidential candidate for re-election.
Yeah.
You get over, it was advertised you had over $1 billion, which means you probably had $2 billion at that point. And now suddenly you're down to crunch time and you're under $50 million in cash on hand. There's going to have to be some type of reconciliation to where that money went.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine if you're just somebody who has donated to Trump's campaign and you've seen the way this money has been handled, and and he comes back to the big donors with his hands outstretched, saying, "Hey, I need more." Like, no, what did you do with the last
And I heard this
10
today.
million I gave you?
I don't quite understand what this means, or I understand all the words they mean, but it doesn't make any sense to me. They were talking about his Facebook ad spend. Facebook has been the number one spend on all social media for the Trump campaign.
That was the case in the first
that makes sense.
election, yeah.
A lot of old folks hang out or non-millennial folks. You're a millennial. I was trying to go down to like Jed, whatever. A lot of older people hang out on. A lot of Trump's crowd is going to be on Facebook. It's going to be their primary
Gen Z
social media platform. And I think what I heard was the most money they spent, the ads, weren't for getting people to vote for Trump. It was getting people to give their information to get on a donor list for Trump. So all of that money they spent on Facebook wasn't necessarily to garner votes or to educate on a policy. It was to identify more people to give money.
I see, yeah.
It feels like sometime around February of 2022, some government commission on federal elections will issue their report on the Trump 2020 spend. There'll be multiple highlights of wrongdoing, and we'll just file it away and just go from there.
Yeah, I think we'll learn a lot about what not to do on a campaign, and I think that it'll be a case study for decades to come on just how incompetent you can be.
So, Brandon, you have a Republican friend. You want that Republican friend. He's Republican. He's conservative. You want that person to vote for Donald Trump and to vote for Republicans straight across the board. How would you go about framing an argument for still voting for Donald Trump and then carrying that enthusiasm downstream for the Republicans?
Well, that's a tough request to make, since that's not an argument I'm making. But I guess if you were to do that, it would have to be an entirely fear-based argument on, Trump is the only thing standing in the way of socialism run amok, on nationalized healthcare and a public option, on more taxes and regulation, and and use it as a moment of scare tactics, and that our economy is going to be decimated because he's going to be more focused on he's going to tread more carefully and be more cautious as far as reopening than Donald Trump has. So, it would have to be and that's why we have to have Republicans. We have to maintain the Senate to make sure this doesn't happen. The fear of one-party control by the Democrats. Court stacking will be part of that. You have to make Americans afraid of that. So you tie in the Green New Deal, but it's really kind of a litany of trying to tie all that together, which I guess you would under the socialism, boogeyman.
Am I making this up, or did Trump say last night he hoped the addition of Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court would allow the ACA to be overruled and thrown out?
I thought he did say that.
He said that. The lunacy of saying you want to throw out a major healthcare program in the middle of a pandemic just lets you know again how much Trump doesn't get how his reality is so twisted. I asked you that question because Ben Shapiro put out a video on Monday, and it was very well done. I think it's probably 8 to 10 minutes, and he lays out, here's why I'm going to vote for Donald Trump. And he talks a lot along the lines that you did, but he gives 3 main points. One was that Trump has governed more conservatively than he thought. And I think if you look back at Trump's policies, they do fit into standard, traditional, conservative governance.
Yeah.
I mean, there's been no real radical policies that Trump has implemented. I don't think he's been pretty straight down the right line.
But most of what he's taking credit for have been, I think, doctrinaire legislation that has bubbled up from the Senate from Mitch McConnell that he has signed off on. So that's true, although I would disagree with Ben on the fact that Trump himself is not a policy wonk and hasn't put forward any groundbreaking new conservative policy in any area.
Did you see that
the judges' argument, though? I'm sure that's part of what Ben is making, because the judges is what you hear time and time again.
Did you see that picture of Mitch McConnell's hands?
Yes. Oh, I forgot.
Holy shit.
I wanted to talk about what is going on with him. I mean, the bandages and the bruises. I mean,
is that like I thought
his hands look,
maybe he's diabetic, because I know diabetics you can bruise pretty easy, but his hands look swollen too.
They look swollen and bruised, and I've seen diabetics that have bruises, but those hands, I mean, they're a completely different color than the rest of his skin.
And
I mean,
one hand was like different color than the other hand too.
That
Mitch,
was bizarre.
You need to get yourself to the doctor, my friend.
Off there,
Mitch, you're gonna take your 2-year victory lap. You got to get yourself in shape for that. Second was just the fact that the left's lost its mind. The AOC branch, this is the socialism, the whole, they're going to pack the court, they're going to ruin government. Those two things, I could at least hear your argument on and understand why, as a traditional conservative, why you come to that. Those at least make sense to me. This is the third one that's getting the most play, and I wanted to get your reaction to this. So Shapiro basically said that Trump's bad behavior is already at its lowest level. And it's been that way for a couple of years. Basically saying Trump can't damage the office of the presidency, the government, or the country anymore by his behavior, because it can't get any worse than what we've already seen.
Oh, I strongly disagree with that. I don't think we haven't seen how low he can go. And because, number one, he at least is reined in by the idea that he has to win re-election to be able to continue.
Correct.
And so once he wins re-election, all bets are off, because he doesn't care anymore, because he can't run for re-election.
Yep.
And so I think if he wins re-election, he immediately fires Dr. Fauci.
100%.
He fires the Attorney
General.
General,
repercussions now.
Barr, which he has already threatened to do.
Yeah.
And who...
he's kind of pissed at Barr right now, because Barr would arrest Biden.
Exactly. So, and then he fires the FBI director as well, Chris Wray. I mean, which he's already hinted at. So... Again, it can get much worse, and then you're going to have, I mean, it's already a revolving door, because, first of all, nobody wants to go work for him, and then anybody who's competent, he fires. And then, you're going to see just, I mean, incredible vacancies throughout the government, and it's going to be, we've already seen such dysfunction and chaos, but it can definitely be taken to a higher level.
I agree. We may think we've seen the low. A Trump not tied
He's going to be emboldened.
Election,
he's going to be like, hey, I can do whatever I want now.
And that was the final point that he made, and this is where I really disagree. The idea that you can't let the media win. You can't let the media narrative that a lot of conservatives feel is not accurate. You can't let that take hold, and you can't give them this win by saying they helped defeat the president. I would flip that right around and say you can't let a president that's acted like this big of a moron.
Yeah, you can't reward that type of behavior.
That. We can't set the precedent that your rhetoric can be as bad as Trump's has been, and you get rewarded with a second term.
We've said on this podcast for many months now that we are at the tipping point of determining whether or not we are creating new norms and setting new precedents, or whether presidency is going to be an aberration. Yeah. If Trump gets reelected, the presidency is no longer an aberration; it's a norm.
Yeah, this is it. I mean, if he wins re-election, everything's on the table for the office of the presidency.
Right.
I said we'd spend the last 10 minutes on Rudy, but he deserves a couple more than that. So.
Yeah, we didn't get into the whole Borat.
Have you watched this movie?
I have not yet. I know it's on Prime. I'll probably watch it this weekend. Yeah.
Give us a little setup to what this scene is.
So this
Have you seen the scene?
I haven't seen the scene yet either. So I'm a little bit kind of in the dark other than what I've read. But he's basically in this bedroom, right? And there's this lobbyist, the daughter of a lobbyist.
I think she's supposed to be a member of the media.
Oh, that's right. She's supposed to be a reporter?
Yeah, she's like a Ukrainian or Russian reporter.
Okay. And so she is in the room. He apparently thinks something's going to go down and starts unbuttoning his pants, puts his hand down his pants.
No, so this is unfair. You've not seen the clip.
I've not seen the clip yet. Yeah.
So yes, and by the way, this was a setup, but this really happened. This wasn't. He was not in on the joke.
No.
Rudy Giuliani.
Because anybody knows how Borat works. I mean, he catches people and politicians off guard, and so there's these concocted scenarios, and they're not in on the joke, and then they're upset after.
Which that's what makes it so funny.
Yeah, that's
is
why
that they're not in
comical,
on the joke. So he meets with this woman. This is a 24-year-old blonde. She looks like every Ukrainian mail order Russian bride you've ever met.
Yeah.
I believe she's a reporter. They are interviewed in a hotel room, and then she says to him, "Let's go have a drink in the bedroom," which Rudy immediately responds to, "You read my mind. Let's do that." So they move to the bedroom. I gotta drink water. I knew this was going to happen as soon as I start telling the story. So they move to the bedroom, and she is taking his microphone off.
Oh, okay.
So she is helping him untuck the wire from his pants. And in the process of taking this microphone off, his shirt comes untucked. So again, you're a 76-year-old man.
Right.
You are the personal lawyer to the president. You're in a room with a 24-year-old Russian reporter. She's helping you take your mic off, and then you lay on the bed and put your hands down your pants to retuck your shirt in.
Okay, so that's how this all happened.
Okay. So after this, as he's doing that, Borat, or Sacha Baron Cohen, the actor,
I know he bursts into the room.
He's
right?
in some sort of pink outfit of some sort.
Right.
Bursts into the room and shouts, "She's only 15, Rudy. She's too young. Stay away from her." And Rudy, who is obviously very surprised, very confused, jumps up and he's like, "Who are you? What are you doing?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm dressed like this because I figured you would want me. Take me. Don't take my daughter."
I did see.
And then Rudy just runs out of the room. It's just as ridiculous as you think it would be. That's the lawyer to the president of the United States.
Oh gosh, my Rudy Giuliani has fallen. Once America's mayor, and now hobnobbing with Ukrainian mobsters. And
I give this
PSA
to men above middle age once a year. If you are,
they may need to hear it twice a year.
50. I'll rephrase. No, if a woman half your age is showing you interest and maybe sexual interest, it's a setup. She wants something. She's not into you. Rudy is 76.
Yeah.
And the idea that he would go to a hotel room to be interviewed by a 24, that's ridiculous.
Is it ego that just causes these guys to think, of course.
It has to be.
Come on. Well, do you remember that NRA guy with the young Russian spy?
Yeah.
I mean, she was super hot, and he's old and overweight, and it's like, really? You thought that she was really into you? I mean, come on.
Old fat guys, I get you. I'm right there. I understand. It's got to be so awesome if a 25-year-old Russian hottie says, "I really think you're cute and I'm into you." You got to be smarter than that, guys. Come on. And Rudy, then you go into the bedroom with this person. I mean, just the lack of self-awareness of who he is, the position he has, and what's going on around him. To me, the big thing with this clip is, one, it's funny. It makes me want to watch the Borat movie. And then two, this links into the Hunter Biden thing. I mean, come on. This is the guy who produced the laptop hard drive with all this magical evidence. This is the guy.
It's like, really?
Come on. What do you do about Rudy Giuliani? I mean, I wanted to shout out there should be a law, but what can we do about Rudy Giuliani?
I don't know.
Think anything.
There's nothing. Yeah, you just. I mean, you can, marginalize him and just, not give him the time of day. I mean, in some ways, I think a lot of the networks invite him on. He's like the, bulldog, defending the president because he's humorous and because it's entertainment value.
Well, I think he's down to AONN, ANN, or ON, or One American News Network. I think he's down to that, and Judge Gene Perino, I think, are the only two media outlets who have the stomach to let Rudy go
Yeah,
on.
there's very few left. I mean, he just doesn't have any credibility.
What's he going to do after the election?
I know he's going to have to find something to do with his time.
He already has a podcast. He'll be in the
Oh,
media.
that's right. I forgot he did start a podcast
somewhere.
He started a podcast when he was digging for dirt on behalf of Trump. Like he was doing that simultaneously, wasn't he?
He went to the Ukraine, and I think he started the podcast when he went to the Ukraine.
I thought he was under investigation at the time he started the podcast too, which I thought was a stupid move.
Rudy is. I would love to know, how is Rudy making money? Who is paying Rudy? Because I don't think the White House is paying him.
Oh gosh, speak about corruption.
Attorney to
that,
the president's an unpaid position.
But after Rudy left office, he, basically started his own high-powered lobbying firm. And if you look at the history, I mean, he has been on the take, helping some pretty bad autocrats throughout the world get deals. I mean, if you look at the countries he's represented, so nothing has been off limits in terms of, him. He doesn't seem to have any moral qualms about working with some of the most ruthless human rights abusers if they pay him, to lobby on their behalf.
It seems like the country's being run by two old New York dudes who know they're in the last 10% of life, who just want to be as much troublemakers and grab as much as they can,
and they don't care
before they go. And they truly
just don't care.
The wake of destruction they leave behind them, nobody cares.
Yeah.
So I'm feeling more comfortable that Joe Biden is going to be elected president.
I am too. I think that, again, the stability we've seen in the polling, consistent 10 to 12-point leads in the national polls, states that mattered like Wisconsin and Michigan, continued 5 to 10-point leads by all the reputable polls. That has not withered at all. And that is a stability we did not see in 2016. People forget that even when Hillary was leading Trump nationally, she was leading within the margin of error, like one margin of error mistake. So give her minus 4 points. That isn't the case with Biden. So even if you account that there's a margin of error issue that we haven't seen, Biden still wins, even accounting for that. And Hillary's lead was volatile. You saw that through the last couple of months. It went up and down, and it was all over the place, and we haven't seen that with Biden. So, again, very different scenario. And, again, that election was driven by facts that were out of the bounds and control of Hillary's campaign, from the email scandal to the Justice Department open investigation. Very different than what we see now. There really isn't anything. And then, unfortunately for Hillary, too, she did not have the benefit of having this massive surge in early voting that could have helped her lock votes up before that damaging information came out. So
538 is a great daily podcast now. They do a podcast every day.
Oh, I need to check theirs out. I haven't. I read their polling every day.
It's data-driven. It's nerdy. Everybody on there is like deep data stuff. And like Tuesday or Wednesday, they did one, and it was on 2016. And you could tell they are all still pissed about 2016, about how much shit they took, how many questions they have to answer. And I think they said it best, where one of them said, "We told you in 2016 he had a 1 in 7 chance to win. We didn't tell you it was impossible. We said it was 1 in 7. The best we can tell you right now is Trump has a 1 in 9 chance of being reelected." Everybody keeps yelling at us because they want the definitive, this is what's going to happen. There is no definitive.
No, it's a game of odds and probabilities.
And the thing, too, they said is like, we had a polling error. The polling error, we didn't weight right non-college educated whites. We didn't, their enthusiasm and the numbers at the poll.
All of the polling firms have adjusted for that polling error this time around. Yeah.
And their prediction was, if there's a polling error this time, it will be to Biden's advantage.
Right.
And they also said, too, a lot of these aggregator sites, they're starting to pull in a bunch of outlier polls to drive the overall numbers down, because they don't want to be the firm that predicted a 5-point, 6-point Biden victory, and that he wins by he loses the state, or he wins by a smaller margin. Right. So there could be one. You never know what error is going to happen in polling.
We could see results
that
exceed what we've seen in the polls.
Absolutely,
especially at the state level.
It feels like if anybody is going to get a bump from an untapped or unknown voters that aren't showing up in this polling, I think Biden has as good a chance of that happening today as Trump does.
Agreed.
All right, so we're down to like the last weekish almost. Give me some bold predictions for next week. We say by the time we get back on the mics next week sometime, look for this to happen.
So I think that, by the end of next week, we will have by the time we get back on the mics, we'll probably have well over 80 million Americans who have voted in advance. By end of week next week, we should have close to 100 million, which is phenomenal. That's, we're talking about a third of the U.S. population. Gosh, are we trying to predict like crazy political surprises?
Here's one I'll give you. Okay. Anonymous comes out this week.
Oh, that's right, because we're waiting on that. That's supposed to still happen, yeah.
Drops their name and does some type of information drop.
I can see that. I think, I'm not willing to say who, but I think we will have another person, somebody will come out with a big endorsement for Biden, another one that'll be surprising. I
Bush.
think that's a lot of people
And what about Barack Obama spitting straight fire at President Trump?
Yeah, he's not even pulling back. Yeah,
of that. I think it feels like he's going to do a couple more of those speeches.
I think
Biden.
so, because he's actually started doing rallies. Yeah.
And how good did it feel just to hear someone make a logical, political,
rational,
campaign.
Coherent, cogent
That's
speech,
what a campaign
appeal.
Speech. It wasn't all fluff.
Rambling.
It wasn't all positive.
Yeah.
He attacked his opponent, but he did it in a way that is within some norms and gave some information as well. So I think Barack will continue to go out there and do that.
I think we'll definitely see that as well.
I could see Bush coming out and endorsing Biden next week.
I could, and even if Bush doesn't come out with a full direct endorsement, I could see Bush coming out with a statement that's basically like a pseudo indirect endorsement where he says, our next president needs to be someone who can bring the country together and projects calmness and humility and all these things, which again is obvious who he's speaking of. So I could see that he takes that route. But yeah, I would expect to see him come out next week. There could be a few other surprises as far as former public officials who jump on the endorsement train.
Did you see Barbara Bollier? If I'm saying her name wrong, I'm
no,
sure.
That's it, Barbara Bollier.
Did you see her response to the question about taxes?
Oh,
where
in the
she
debate?
says, "I'm drawing a blank."
Oh, wait, was this an interview she gave?
I think this was in the debate.
Okay, because I did not. The debate was actually, I think it was last night. I thought it was the same night as the actual debate.
I saw this last night. I
did not see this.
I follow some Kansas legislative people, and they put a clip up, and they're like, "Wow, this is really not bad." But I bring this up, or this is really bad. Did you see Jody Ernst, who didn't know the price of soybeans or whatever?
Yeah, and you remember when she first ran, it was, I grew up on about squealing hogs, and, she's a farmer. And
it was a good reminder that all politics are local.
Was this about the Bollier not know the tax rates? What was the thing?
They asked her some question about taxes, and she said, "I'm sorry, I'm drawing a complete blank," which you never do. Just spit something out that's completely not on point, but just keep talking until something happens to you. But my point being is, again, you're a Democrat running in Kansas. Do you not think tax and spend liberal is going to be the number 1, 2, and 3 attack?
You got to be ready.
You got to have that down.
You got to be ready
Junior,
for it.
You're in Iowa. You should know hogs, soybeans, corn, whatever farm shit you got. You've got to be able to answer those questions.
Right.
Just the lack of awareness, and I call that professionalism through some of these candidates is a bit head scratching.
Yeah, it is. It's lack of awareness. It's being out of touch at different points. I want to say that there was an interview Barbara Bollier did where she was asked about, it was the Patriot Act, where she kind of gave that response and then immediately kind of know the Patriot Act or wasn't able to speak. What is that type of response? So she's done that before. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what impact that has on the race. That race, by the way, is neck and neck. One poll has Marshall ahead by 4, which is margin of error. Another poll has them tied, both out this week. Closest Senate race we've seen in Kansas in decades, so it'll be interesting.
My favorite is Tommy Tuberville in Alabama, who just refuses to talk about any issue because he's just dumb. It just doesn't know, and he just says, "I don't care." Trump 2020, and that's all he's got.
Yeah, I listened to Doug Jones on the New Abnormal podcast talking about the race.
If there was any way he could win that election,
I mean, awesome. And I don't know if it's just optimism on their side, but they think that they could win by a point or less, and I don't know, but because they're asking for money and trying to do that, but that would be a tough.
Yeah. If that happens, we win Texas.
That's a
and
landslide.
Georgia.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah,
we're in historic dominating win at that point.
I do think out of Georgia and Texas, I think it might be possible for Georgia to flip before Texas. I think so. If you're going to read those tea leaves, just based on the black vote and the percentage in Georgia versus Texas, and how actually Stacey Abrams has worked on that get out the vote and registration initiative since she lost, which could pay dividends this time around.
I always have to remind people, Stacey Abrams lost by 50,000 votes.
Yeah.
Not 5,000, not 500, 50,000. She has no legitimate claim to be the governor of Georgia.
Right.
Sorry, folks. She's an interesting candidate.
Yeah.
She has a real future, but she lost that election.
But in Georgia, the suburban vote, they elected a number of Democrats to Republican-held congressional districts last time around. All of the polling indicates it's close. It's either tied or, a point in either direction. So that'll be one to watch on election night.
Next week, you can walk us through your election night routine.
Yes.
What you're going to be focused on, what to watch. I'm interested in some of the local elections, too. What should I be? Because sometimes you get so focused at the top level.
I know. I usually have
things.
5 devices going, and I'm going back and forth trying to
monitors. Yeah,
because there's so much to
like I said, we're going to do a little recording election night. I'm going to be out of town, but the rule is you just let me know when you've processed what you processed, and we could go from there. Because I actually don't think this is going to be a long night.
I hope
think
you're right.
Florida falls by 10, and we're done.
That would be the best outcome. Florida falls by 10.
Yeah.
They count their mail-in ballots when they get them, which means that we will know election night. Unlike
he wins by 3 or 4
some
points.
of the other states. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think then it's done because then Trump has no pathway.
And then we just pivot to how long are we going to argue about this in court?
Yeah.
That's really the thing at that point.
Pretty much.
All right. That's our hour. Thanks, Brandon.
Thanks, Craig.